Hi everyone, my name is Chris Jones, and this is my article review number 2. The title of it is called Food Price Volatility and Its Consequences. It's by Rabah Arzki, Karim El Ainui, Yal Yarko, and Francis Teal. It was published on Oxford Economic Papers, Volume 68, Issue number 3. It was published July 1st, 2016, and we're going to be looking at pages 655 through 664. So the issues discussed within this essay are listed right here in 3 bullet points. The first one is quoted from the article itself. Just how important are links between international and domestic prices related to food? That's the first one, related to food. The second one, understanding the dynamic of domestic prices, including the emergence of bubbles and seasonality. And the third, I paraphrased here, the importance of high domestic food prices possibly linked to riots and seasonality on poverty outcomes. So what I took from that is saying that people who have lower incomes are really affected by the food price volatility, and the riots, people who riot, who feel civil unrest, find it hard to be able to have an income, a steady enough income to go and buy these foods, because the prices are so volatile. They're never consistent, and so they're going to be looking into that. That's what the article looked into, and what it discussed, and what they think, what the authors hypothesized could be a possible reason for such outrage in society. So the purpose of this essay is to understand the volatility of food prices and essentially what it's linked to, which is why the authors, the writers, hypothesize that it could be linked to riots and low-income households. And they also want to offer new insights for current questions concerning food policies. So one thing they made clear is that these questions are not new. They've been around for quite a long time, and yet they're still current. They're still current questions. So with this essay, they were hoping to find a new understanding, find new reasons, and new solutions for food issues around the world. So now the hypothesis and the method. So as I already said, the hypothesis is essentially the issues in trying to understand why food volatility is the way it is and how they can fix it, and why some areas are affected so much more than others. So they organize this essay into 3 groups. The first group addresses issues related to links between food prices and inflation and long-run determinants of food prices. The second group presents papers covering the causes of price bubbles, the effects of seasonality, and food price hikes as a possible cause of civil unrest in Africa. Now, this essay does focus a lot more on Africa, mostly because that Africa is one of the most food insecure places on the planet. They have the most inconsistent food prices, food resources, and I think that's why they focus on Africa a lot more. The final group considers policies for price stability in poor countries. Once again, poor countries include Africa, areas around the Middle East, Asia, essentially in that area. Nowhere really on the Western Hemisphere where America is. Mexico could be possibly one of them, but it's not at the very, very bottom like Africa. Alright, so now for the critique of the article. We'll start with the title. So the title, I thought, was somewhat clear, but also a little vague. It's titled, in case you forgot, Food Price Volatility and Its Consequences. Now, it does say it's going to be about food prices and how it's up and down, but it really doesn't say much more. It says consequences, and usually consequences are related to something probably more negative rather than positive, but still we don't know. If they were to fix it, I think could probably add something about low-income countries, countries struggling within their economy, places that don't really have easy access to food resources, because essentially that's really what this it talks about. The fact that it talks about Africa, India, areas really that have low income, but it doesn't say that in the title, which is something I think it should. Now the abstract is very efficient, and it details exactly what's going to be in the essay. It offers a lot of background, comparing it to oil prices, metal, um, but essentially it goes down to food. Food is what is important in this essay, and it offers reasons as to why they're going to be talking about this. So I thought it was very informational, very well done. The purpose I thought was a little hard to find simply because the introduction is so very long, and I felt that the purpose of this article, or the main points, were kind of spread out throughout the introduction rather than finding in one place or at least one paragraph. The introduction, like I said, was a little long, and it made everything very just spread out, made everything feel longer, less mainstream, more kind of broad, less focused. I thought I think the discussion is very relevant at this point in time, especially since that there's all kinds of food insecure areas in the world. The population is growing, meaning that we have less food to supply in general. I think, especially in South Africa where water has been running out. And I know if I have a good friend who's from Africa and his whole family lives back there. I think that could also be part of the food discussion, or its own separate discussion. But I think that food in general, talking about food prices, is very relevant. Something I thought was a little overly emphasized was that it always talked about Africa. And I know that Africa is so food insecure, has um, it's very hard on its people who live there. Um, but I would like to know more about the world rather than such low income areas. I want to know maybe how it compares instead. I thought some areas can be condensed, especially the introduction. It was little too much information, honestly. If it was more focused and clear, it would make the essay a little bit better. Objectivity. I think that these authors know a lot about what they're talking about. They use very hard facts, evidence, they use logic. It is possible that they come from food insecure areas, or they have been affected by price volatility, not knowing what prices could be, or having a hard time finding food in general. But I thought it was very objective, very clear, um, and whatnot. For the conclusion, I just have a couple questions that I thought I wish they would have touched on. What policies have worked so far? In 2016, what were the policies in place then? I wish they would have talked about that a little bit more. They did talk about it a little bit in India, how they were solving it, but really nowhere else did they talk about what policies have worked. I also want to know maybe what were the previous policies, years back. Did they work? Did any portion of them work? It would have been interesting for them to maybe put that into the essay. That's something that I really would have been interested in knowing. Overall, I thought the article was very informative, very eye-opening, and pretty thorough. It made a lot of sense, and I thought, it did a really good job on talking about food insecurity and price volatility, and having evidence to back up their hypothesis. Yet they don't really come to a full conclusion. There is a general conclusion in the article.